was never designed to be a frontline. For decades, it existed as strategic background noise, a frozen expanse acknowledged in military textbooks but rarely felt in real-time decision-making. Yet history has a pattern. When global power structures begin to shift, forgotten spaces suddenly become decisive. Greenland is no longer silent because the world around it is no longer stable. What we are witnessing today is not a territorial dispute, but the exposure of a pressure fault that has existed beneath the ice for generations. The Arctic compresses the planet in ways most people fail to grasp. Distances that appear enormous on conventional maps collapse when viewed through the logic of missile trajectories, early warning timelines, and nuclear response windows. From the far north, the time between detection and impact is measured not in minutes, but in moments. Greenland sits directly inside this compressed geometry. Whoever dominates its surveillance envelope shapes the rhythm of global deterrence. Russia has always treated the Arctic differently than the West. For Moscow, the North is not a frontier to be expanded into, nor a bargaining chip in diplomacy. It is a structural necessity. Russia's geography leaves it exposed across vast flatlands, making the Arctic its natural shield and its most reliable strategic corridor. Beneath the ice operate ballistic missile submarines designed not to threaten, but to ensure survival. Above the ice sit radar systems whose sole purpose is to buy seconds in a world where seconds decide extinction. While Western attention drifted toward the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and the Indo-Pacific, Russia invested steadily and quietly in Arctic integration. Airfields were reopened and hardened. Ports were expanded to support year-round logistics. Command structures were adapted specifically for polar operations. This was not expansionism, it was consolidation. A long-term posture built on the assumption that one day others would remember why the Arctic mattered. That day has arrived. For NATO and the United States, Greenland now appears as a strategic gap that must be closed. The logic is understandable. As ice retreats and technology advances, regions once considered unreachable become accessible. Surveillance assets that once seemed excessive now feel insufficient. From Washington's perspective, strengthening presence in Greenland is framed as defensive insurance. But defense, in strategic reality, is never absolute. It is always perceived relative to someone else's vulnerability. This is where friction begins. Every radar installed, every runway extended, every permanent deployment subtly alters the balance of detection and response. Russia does not interpret these moves as neutral. It interprets them as compression. Compression of warning time, compression of maneuver space, compression of ambiguity. These are not abstract concerns. They are mathematical realities embedded into nuclear doctrine. When Russia issues warnings about the Arctic, Western media often portray them as aggressive signaling. But in strategic terms, these messages function as boundary markers. Russia is not announcing intent to escalate. It is declaring that certain thresholds cannot be crossed without forcing recalibration of deterrence posture. In nuclear strategy, clarity is not hostility, it is stabilizing honesty. Greenland also exposes NATO's internal contradictions. Officially, Greenland belongs to Denmark, a sovereign state and full NATO member. In theory, alliance principles should ensure that no member's territory becomes a unilateral staging ground for another's ambitions. In practice, NATO operates through strategic gravity. That gravity flows toward the United States. When American priorities intensify, consultation becomes formality rather than negotiation. This creates silent strain. European allies are placed in positions where resistance risks irrelevance and compliance risks sovereignty. The alliance appears unified externally, but internally it functions through hierarchy rather than consensus. Russia understands this dynamic deeply. It does not need to exploit it, it only needs to observe it. The Arctic does not reward improvisation, it punishes it. Operating in extreme cold requires logistics designed years in advance, crews trained for isolation, and systems hardened against failure where rescue is impossible. Russia's advantage in the region is not technological surprise, it is endurance. Presence accumulated over decades cannot be offset by rapid deployment. NATO's challenge in Greenland is not access, but coherence. Is the objective deterrence, reassurance, or dominance? Each demands a different posture. Mixing them creates ambiguity that destabilizes rather than deters. A system built for surveillance can easily be interpreted as preparation for interception. Infrastructure framed as resilience can resemble staging capability when viewed from the opposite side of the radar screen. The Arctic magnifies misinterpretation because reaction times are unforgiving. There is no buffer zone for diplomatic correction once systems are engaged. This is why Restraint historically governed the region, not out of goodwill, but out of mutual recognition that mistakes here cannot be undone. Greenland's sudden prominence reflects a broader global pattern. The era of uncontested strategic expansion is ending. There are no empty spaces left on the map. Every region with strategic value is already woven into someone's survival calculus. The Arctic is simply where this reality is most visible, because its margins are absolute. This is not about an imminent war, it is about erosion of the rules that prevented one. Stability rarely collapses through dramatic confrontation. It erodes through incremental normalization of risk. Each small move justified as defensive necessity. Each reaction framed as proportional, until momentum replaces intention. Russia does not need Greenland to project power. What it needs is assurance that Greenland will not be transformed into a forward platform that undermines second strike stability. NATO, meanwhile, struggles to articulate whether its Arctic posture serves collective defense or unilateral advantage. The difference matters because deterrence depends not on capability alone, but on predictability. Predictability is what kept the Arctic quiet for decades. In the past, all major powers understood what not to do in the North. There was an implicit respect for the void. The Arctic was left alone not because it lacked value, but because its value was too dangerous to contest openly. Today, that restraint is being tested by actors who arrived late to the game and now are trying to catch up quickly. The danger is not Russia's presence. Russia has always been there. The danger is strategic impatience, the belief that technological superiority can compensate for geographic disadvantage, the assumption that deterrence can be recalibrated without consequence. History does not support these assumptions. Greenland is not becoming a battlefield because someone wants it to be. It is becoming a stress test of whether modern alliances still understand the logic of restraint. Power today is measured less by what is deployed and more by what is deliberately withheld. Silence in the Arctic is not absence, it is discipline. Beneath the ice, sensors listen. Above it, satellites watch. No one needs to announce readiness because readiness is permanent. This is why Greenland matters now, not because it invites conflict, but because it reveals how close the world has come to forgetting why some spaces were deliberately left untouched. If stability fails in the Arctic, it will not fail loudly, it will fail quietly, through overlapping systems, shortened timelines, and assumptions that reaction can replace foresight. Greenland is not yet a flashpoint, it is a warning surface, a place where power is tested not by action, but by restraint. And that restraint is now under pressure. The question facing NATO, the United States, and Russia is not who controls Greenland, but who controls the pace of change around it. In a region where mistakes cannot be corrected, speed is not strength, patience is. Because in the Arctic, once the ice cracks, there is no way to seal it again.